And at that time in Europe, most Jewish girls, when they went to the chuppah to get married, were virgins. They knew that. And so what the Nazis would often do is, as these beautiful young girls would come off the transport, they would look to see who looked to be the most beautiful. And they would select them to become the prostitutes, the whores, the sluts of the Nazi officers. And they were housed there so that they didn't mingle with the other inmates. They had their own bathing facilities so that they would not get body lice, or they wouldn't get any of the other diseases. This went on for several years. And when it was determined, after a girl was used up, it's just a short walk to the gas chamber that we're going to go over in a little while. At one particular time, there were 99 young girls between the ages of 13 to 16 living in there. And they all came from a girls' yeshiva here in Poland. And within Judaism, I'm sure you know that there's a view that suicide is not allowed. Again, we're made in the image of God. Rabbis interpret that today, that suicide can be viewed as a mental illness, and if somebody is ill, then you interpret it differently. But these girls, being yeshiva girls, being extremely Orthodox, knew that suicide was not right. And yet they also felt that to allow their bodies to be used in such a degrading way, that also was not right. So they made a pact, and they wrote a poem or a prayer together called the 99 Maidens of Israel. Many times it is read in synagogues on Yom Kippur, on Yom HaShoah. We'll be reading it later. It will be read tomorrow. And these girls all, as they were given time to bathe and get ready, because they were told when they would be used for the evening, instead of doing that, they had calculated how to do this, how to do it quickly, and who would be the last one alive. And they wrote this tefillah, these 99 Maidens of Israel, and they signed it. When the Nazis came, they were all dead. Some of the inmates that were in the outside heard that this was going to happen. But the story was not really found until after the war. We have their exact words coming out, their names. But it didn't stop the Nazis. They got a fresh batch. They were able to get some kind of poison that was used because of their medical experiments that were used. It took a long time. Can you imagine, some of you have younger sisters that are 13, 14, 15. Imagine being used that way. Imagine yourself being used that way. When you know, and the way you've been brought up, about cleanliness and godliness, sexuality is so private, and to be raped over and over and over again. How do you live with that? And yet these Nazi officers would also then go back to their families. Mm-hmm. Many of them lived either right outside the grounds or on the grounds. So that's why that was protected, so they wouldn't get infected. Right.
Black hair with the most bluest eyes that Mengele wanted to build a race on. And he wanted her for something. But my mother, being a mother, said, my children will go with me. He just yelled at her, put the child down and go to the right. He said, my children will go with me. He got so angry at her that she didn't obey him. He took this baton stick-like in his hand. I was holding my 4-year-old little sister's hand because my mother told me, hold on to her tight so she doesn't get lost in this chaos. And he took this baton and hit my hand between her. We both started bleeding and crying. And I had to let go of her little hand. And he pushed me away from my family. And I begged him. I practically crawled up on his boots to hold him to let me go with my family. And he picked up the book and he just kicked me away. And my mother was already a little bit away from me, and I heard her call out to me, don't cry, I will come for you later. That was the last time I heard my mother's voice. I had the pleasure of sitting on one of those holes. I had to find a safe place to find my mother's diamonds. The whole time I was here, I swallowed and I retrieved the diamond over and over again.
Irene, how long were you here?
I was here from the end of April. We came in, and I was taken away. I was saved out of here just right a little bit after the revolt. They were already liquidated.
In which year? Which year?
1944. So, where was I?
You were retrieving the diamond.
And so I had to find a place for the diamond. And I retrieved the diamonds over and over again. It would have been safer. Yeah. Well, before, it would have been safer to throw the diamonds away. And I found out that you can't buy bread, not even for diamonds, because when my mother gave me the diamond, she said, this is to buy bread, because in the ghetto they told us we were going to work in the vineyard. And she said, if we work in separate places and you get hungry, I want you to buy bread for the diamonds. But we didn't go to the vineyard. And there was no place in Birkenau to buy bread, because the bread was more important than the diamonds. But I had to save the diamonds because it carried my mother's love and strength. Before I was selected by Mengele for his experiments, I was also chosen to go to work to Canada. Canada we called Brzezinka, but among us that was Canada. The reason it was Canada, because Canada was the most prosperous country at that time. And this camp, that warehouse that we worked, had an abundance of everything. Everything that came from all parts of Jews, rich, poor, whatever, the most valuable things came into Birkenau. We were selected 5 girls, and they injected our eyes. And they took us to Auschwitz, and we walked to Auschwitz, from here to Auschwitz. And it was together, it was one camp. Auschwitz-Birkenau was Auschwitz. We didn't have the separation of all these different nooks and crannies. And in Auschwitz, they put us in the dungeon. Most of you saw the dungeon today. And 5 of us in a little, our shower in our hotel is about that size. And 5 of us were in one of those dungeons. And we stood in water about up until our ankles. And when they locked the doors, it was complete darkness. And we were 5 of us, like sardines packed together. That's where I met Sapka. She was standing next to me, and she was like taller than me. And that's the one place that we were able to talk, and nobody heard us, nobody came to shoot us for talking. And she said to me, what is your name? I said, Hannah. And I said, what is yours? And she says, Sapka. And she says, Hannah, I want you to bend, scoop down and go down to the floor and drink water. And then come back up. And I came up, and she went down. And when she came up, all 5 of us went down. Because we couldn't go bend down, all 5 of us. We didn't have the room. So one at a time had to stoop down. And she said, because when we have to go to the bathroom, we won't be able to drink the water. But that didn't happen. We drank it anyway. But we were there for, I don't know, And when they brought us out, the 5 of us from the dungeon, they took us out in the courtyard, which now you call the shooting wall. And they regularly examined our eyes. 3 out of the 5 were blind. They took them away. We never saw them again. Of course, they were no more use to them. And Sapka and I were taken back to Birkenau. We still didn't know why they were doing that. But when we came back to the barrack, the couple said, "Let me see your eyes." And she looked at our eyes and she said, "What color were your eyes when you went to Auschwitz?" And Sapka said, "Green." And she said, "Well, they're still green." And I said, "Well, why wouldn't they be?" And she says, "Well, because they were supposed to be blue. You were supposed to change the color of your eyes."